So again, welcome everyone. Today I want to explore two different aspects of human existence, the doing and the being modes. And I read the talk before half an hour or so ago to refresh my memory, and I realized that I say a lot of words, but I could probably sum it up in a couple of sentences. Do less and spend more time connecting with your being. Yeah, that's about it. Think about doing less and spending more time sitting quietly. So I read my talk and then I went for a nice quiet walk. I just figured I'd practice what I was saying. But I'll say all the words anyway because sometimes they can be inspiration. Doing and being. And how can meditation help us touch into our being? So the doing mode is that analytical, logical aspect of existence. It's focused on achieving goals and solving problems and the activity. On the other hand, being is, and it's not really a mode, being is our essential nature. Although we're called human beings, we're not called human doings, but we as the saying goes, but we act more like human doings, right? We're often caught up in a cycle of doing and becoming and always striving for the next thing, and overlooking our essential being, that presence that's always there. And there's an imbalance, I would say, between doing and being. There's an increased emphasis on mindfulness and connecting with being, and connecting with awareness. There's still not enough emphasis on connecting in this way. And I'm not saying that we abandon doing. We're still going to do, but rather bringing doing and being into harmony. So that's really what I want to talk about, is how to bring these two into harmony. We're all familiar with the doing mode. Most of us spend the vast majority of our time, if not all of our time for some, existing in the doing mode, right? Accomplishing tasks, solving problems. On the other hand, perhaps very little time resting in being, that unchanging nature of our existence beyond our roles and identities and activities. And we call it has all kinds of names in different spiritual traditions. It has different names: presence, awareness, pure consciousness, Buddha nature. There's others as well, and no words are actually adequate to capture it, although we give it these labels anyway. It's the innermost core of ourselves, free from all the fluctuations of thoughts and emotions and relationships and activities. And it's not limited by the ego or individual personality, and it encompasses a really non-separation with all of life. So from the point of view of being, there are no others. There's just itself and an absence of otherness. And it's what I often call love. It's known as love in relation to beings, and perhaps beauty in relation to things. I heard that put that way. I think that's captures it in a beautiful way. It's love in relation to beings and beauty in relation to things and phenomenon. And practices like meditation or prayer help us access and embody this essence. But most human beings, I would say, are not balanced between the doing and the being. They're not balanced. We've really gone into more and more, I think, doing to the extreme. and the connection with being is weak. We're lost in thinking and doing. And because of that, most human beings, I think, become frustrated and unhappy because they realize the futility of all the doing. There's this real sense of unsatisfactoriness, or what the Buddha called dukkha. And with this unsatisfactoriness or dukkha, there's a longing to connect with something deeper. I mean, that's why we come to meditation groups. That's why you're on a Thursday night, you're logging onto Zoom to sit here and listen to this and sit and meditate. There's some kind of aspiration or longing for something deeper. We're caught up in this never-ending cycle of doing, and we know there's something more essential that's being overlooked. We know that our happiness it's not contained in all the actions and accomplishments, and all the seeking for a better destination. And this mindset overlooks our essence. Even spiritual seekers have this going on. The spiritual seekers will often ask, what must I do to reach my essential being? What must I do? But the idea of needing to do something to be is it misses the point. So we can even make our spiritual life more seeking and doing, and get caught into the same cycle in our spiritual life. I think that's why talks on ending our seeking are so popular, because I think deep at some level we know that we're trapped in doing in so many aspects of our life. We can encounter our essential being in many ways. Meditation is one way, but there are other ways. For example, when we're faced with a life challenge or death of a loved one, or an illness, or some setback, or simply by accident. We sense into it. Sometimes we're just forced to listen. For example, if we encounter some illness or something that challenges our ability to do, in these moments we're forced to listen. We're forced to just be. And in those times we may get glimpses of our essence, of our being. Perhaps the death of someone close to us forces us to confront the impermanence of life, including our own mortality. And when we're faced with the inevitability of death, doing just seems less important, and often we'll surrender into being at those times. And at other times we may just stumble upon our essential being by accident. We just may have a profound moment where our essential being is simply seen. It can happen. It happens unexpectedly, right? Like I say, by accident. In a lot of ways, I sometimes say we do all this practice simply to make ourselves more accident prone. So that it's like some teachers call it a grace. It's to me, it's kind of the same. It just accidentally occurs. It's nothing we did, or But I always say, people say, well, what if it's just a grace or an accident? Then why practice? And my answer is some version of it makes us more accident prone. So it can occur at any moment. It could occur while we're in nature, in solitude, in moments of deep connection with another human being is quite common. moments of creative activities, art and music, dance, and in near-death experiences, which we've had. We've talked a little bit about that in this group. But even without challenges or accidents or graces, meditation, it can be a doorway or an access point, a portal, as I've also called it. And we could start slowly experimenting with allowing our being to become kind of more of a default place to go and to rest, a go-to kind of resting place. We can keep reminding ourselves that our essential being is already and always here. And we'll likely to need to do this repeatedly. And it may seem like the hardest work to do as human beings, to string together even a few moments of present wakefulness or connecting with our beingness. And some people say, why bother? It just seems so difficult. But all I can say is the alternative is much worse. The alternative is much worse. And we are capable of accessing our essential being. As I've seen with many people I've worked with, teaching people to meditate. And formal meditation is really a radical act of love, where we shift together momentarily from constant doing to asking, like, who is doing all the doing, first of all, and ultimately, what knows that all the doing is actually happening. So the first step is kind of really seeing not self, right? Who is doing all this doing? And the other is what is it that knows that all this doing is actually going on? And we can also allow being to reveal itself simply by doing less. What if we considered the option of doing less? For instance, when we wake up in the morning, we likely have a lot of plans for the day, perhaps, but can we approach all those plans in a new way? Instead of feeling obligated, can we approach these tasks with a sense of ease and flow, simply allowing them to happen without a sense of compulsion or obligation? So doing less. Can we shift our focus from what we think we must do to what we really want to do next? And then what do we want to do after that? And so on. By letting go of the notion of having to do something. Other than perhaps the necessary things like eating and doing your taxes and so on. But other than those necessary tasks, we can free ourselves from the constant doing and allow space for being to reveal itself. So I really invite you to explore this doing less and being more in the flow. I told my wife I was doing this talk, and she says, "Yeah, I see that. But it's kind of, it's made you a little bit dysfunctional." I said, "What?" She goes, "Well, you don't really remember any of the plans that we have. You get up in the morning and then say, oh, let's go for like a long walk, or do you want to go for a long hike today?" And I go, "Well, you got to take your dad to the dentist, and then you got to go, oh yeah. So there is a certain amount of all those necessary things that we have to do, but and you do when you sort of let go of feeling the compulsion. At least in my case, I don't know if it's common, but there is a kind of sense of enjoying flow as opposed to to-do lists. So connecting into our being mode, and we often perceive our being mode as actually intermixed with all the content of our life, right? And it seems that our being takes on the qualities of our and features of our experience. For example, when we say I'm tired, it seems as though our being is conditioned by the feeling of tiredness, that it's influenced or shaped, that being is influenced or shaped by the content of our experience, our life. But this is not the case. Being is not tied to any specific conditions or qualities. It's not limited by the content of our experience, nor is it affected by the content of our experience. Now, I've often used the example of the sky. It's not limited or affected by the clouds or the birds that appear within it. Our being is not affected by the content of our experience, the thoughts and emotions that appear within it. Our being remains untouched by the ever-changing nature of our experiences. And this is important to understand, because it allows us to recognize the true nature of our being. It is silent, transparent, still. It's beyond the fluctuations and instabilities of our daily experiences. And by reaching into our being through meditation or prayer, we gradually disentangle ourselves from the content of our experiences. So as our fascination with the content of our experience fades, our being simply reveals itself. It reveals its pure essence, free from limitations, free from the conditioning imposed by the content of our experience. And in this way, we, by recognizing our inherent nature, we realize our being is infinite, interconnected with all existence. And this understanding is what we call awakening or enlightenment, or whatever word we give it. But it's the understanding is the truth of who we are beyond all the surface level movements of life. And it's important to also recognize that with this understanding, we don't stop doing. We simply balance doing and being. For me, the yin-yang symbol it represents this. I know if people are deeply into Taoism, I'm probably not using the symbol entirely correct, but the one, it's the white and the black symbol, the yin-yang, and the one representing yin or being, I guess we could say, and the other representing the more energetic yang or doing. And within each shape, there's a small dot symbolizing the presence of the other energy within. So you can see that the energies are balanced, and they're also contained within each other. So it teaches us that being and doing are not mutually exclusive, but rather complementary aspects of our existence. So we can integrate moments of stillness and presence into our active lives. And we can infuse our actions with this wise intention and awareness. So we're really recognizing that both being and doing have value and are necessary for our well-being. And by doing so, we avoid the extremes, and we find a harmonious rhythm with the flow of life. So this the idea of doing. I mean, in Taoism, they actually call it. They refer to non-doing, and I won't go too far down that path. But you could really think of doing and being very conscious of the doing. So it's a balancing and harmonizing of doing and being, which means for the vast majority of human beings, spending more resources, time in resting and being, so doing less, and being very, I think, aware of the doing. I kind of, I've talked about we still have to do things. There's different types of doing that I've noticed that arise for me in my life. And one type of doing, of course, is the very practical day-to-day things, like doing your taxes or going to appointments and so on. And that can, depending on, and going to work, depending on your life, it could take up a fair bit of your time. The other type of doing that I've noticed is a doing that has a real, it bubbles up from being, and it's a doing that wants to spread happiness, I guess you could say, or love into the world. So it's going to visit a friend or inviting some people over to have a tea or a glass of wine or whatever it is. And so it's this doing that really wants to spread happiness to others. And the third type, what I guess you could call, is the being or the doing that involves distracting ourselves. And so really watch for this one in particular. When, for example, if boredom arises. For many people, the first thing that happens is there's some doing that then occurs. And that's where things like, watching TV, reading a book, having a drink, and so on, these kinds of activities that distract us from emotions that we don't want to feel. So really be aware of that doing and seeing how much time is spent in doing that kind of doing. And I'm not saying don't do any of that, right? I guess what I would say is when, let's go back to boredom, arises, I would spend some time with boredom. So just pause and spend some time with boredom. Say maybe 5 minutes. I mean, longer if it feels appropriate. Spending some time with boredom. No, this is boredom. This is how it feels. So again, not resisting what's arising. And then, go and read your book or watch your TV program or whatever it is that you may be distracting yourself from the boredom. But just a little pause too, and you might find that pause just gets longer, and once you touch into being, boredom just kind of dissipates, and you then can just enjoy resting in your being, and may just want to go for a walk and listen to the birds or something along those lines. So not stopping doing, but I would say doing a lot less doing for most people, and being very aware of the doing that gets engaged in. Looking at the different types of doing, and then spending that time meditating or praying, doing yoga, whatever spiritual practice we could call it, engage in that on a regular basis, where you just take the time to connect in some way with your essential being. So we're cultivating being and connecting with being on a more regular basis, and just checking in and noticing the beauty and the love that's contained in that connecting. But it's something that we can connect with any time during the day, because it's always there, right? It's always there. It's not going anywhere. You don't have to do anything to connect with it. In fact, doing often disconnects us from it, creates barriers, because there's a sense of grasping, which is doing, more doing. So that's, I guess, one reason why I like to keep it very simple in terms of accessing our essential being, not making it a huge deal, not making it some extraordinary thing, although it is extraordinary. But it's also very natural. It's our natural state, although it's not a state, but it's more of our natural state than our egoic state.